The old farmhouse sat nestled on the edge of a sleepy rural town, the kind of place where time seemed to move just a bit slower and the night sky was darker than ink. It was a place where neighbors knew each other by name, where doors remained unlocked, and where secrets, if they existed, stayed buried under layers of soil and silence. The Sanders family had moved in just 7 months earlier, parents Emma and Ryan, their 14-month-old daughter Lily, and their adopted German shepherd, Max. Max was not just a pet. He was family. Rescued from an abusive home by Emma 2 years ago, he had a quiet protectiveness about him, always placing himself between Lily and anything unfamiliar, even shadows. On the evening of October 14th, the air had a peculiar stillness. Autumn had settled in, and the rustling of fallen leaves across the front porch added a soft soundtrack to the fading daylight. Inside, the house was warm and peaceful. Emma rocked Lily in her arms, humming softly, as Max lay curled on the rug, ears perked every few minutes at the distant sounds of the wind. Ryan, tired from a long day of work at the nearby mechanic shop, was already asleep on the couch with a book resting against his chest. Life was quiet, uneventful in the best of ways. But no one knew that this night would become the one they'd never forget. It began at exactly 3:07 a.m. A low growl, deep and guttural, echoed through the hallway. Max, who had been sleeping by Lily's crib as he always did, suddenly shot up, ears fully alert, eyes locked on the nursery window. The growl grew into a whimper, as if something within him was fighting between fear and urgency. He paced. He barked softly. Then he turned to Lily, who stirred in her sleep. Without hesitation, Max reached up and gently tugged the corner of the baby blanket with his teeth, revealing her tiny, sleeping form. Another bark, sharper this time, then a soft whine. Max licked her cheek, nudging her gently. Lily blinked awake, confused and groggy. Then he did something unthinkable. Max grasped the edge of Lily's pajama top, gently and cautiously, and began to pull. At first, Lily sat still, unsure whether to cry or giggle. But Max was persistent. He pawed at the crib's edge and looked back as if urging her to move. With clumsy legs and sleepy eyes, she crawled over the edge onto the soft rug below, something she had only done once before, under Emma's supervision. But tonight, no parent was watching. No one was there to say it was safe. Max led her to the hallway, nudging her along with his nose. They reached the front door, which was slightly ajar, something Emma would have sworn was locked before bed. With a careful nose push, Max nudged the door fully open. The cold October air rushed in, biting and damp. Still, Max pushed forward, turning every few feet to ensure Lily followed. They stepped into the darkness together. At that exact moment, Emma woke up with a gasp. She didn't know why. There was no noise. No scream. No sudden bang. Just a mother's instinct, the kind that awakens you without explanation. She sat up, heart racing, ears scanning the silence. Ryan was still asleep, his hand dangling over the edge of the couch. Emma tiptoed down the hallway, first checking their room, then the nursery. That's when she froze. The crib was empty. Panic gripped her chest like a vice. "Lily," she called out, her voice cracking with disbelief. She ran to the window. Nothing. Then to the hallway. Nothing. And then her eyes fell on the open front door, swaying slightly, as if someone had just passed through it. She screamed. Ryan bolted upright, the book tumbling to the floor. "What? What is it?" But Emma was already out the door, barefoot, not feeling the cold, her only thought being, Lily is gone. Outside, the yard was eerily quiet. A faint fog had crept in, making everything feel surreal. And then she saw them. Footprints, tiny ones. Lily's. Leading across the yard. And paw prints beside them. "Max," Emma whispered, her heart thudding. She followed the trail with Ryan close behind. "What is going on?" he shouted, breathless. But Emma didn't answer. She couldn't. Her mind was racing with every worst-case scenario imaginable. The footprints led them past the barn, down toward the edge of the woods. Emma's feet were numb now, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. The thought of Lily, her baby, out in the cold with only a dog to protect her was a kind of fear she never knew existed. And then, through the fog, they saw it. Max standing still. Guarding. And just behind him, Lily, sitting safely in the grass, completely unharmed. But it was what lay beneath the ground just feet from her that would change everything. Emma's breath caught in her throat as she saw her daughter, safe, whole, and seemingly unaware of the chaos she had just caused by her absence. Lily sat quietly in the grass, blinking up at the full moon, her tiny fingers wrapped around a fallen leaf as if it were a toy. The night wind tugged gently at her curls, and her cheeks were flushed from the cold. Emma let out a choked sob of relief and rushed forward, scooping Lily into her arms and pressing her face into her baby's shoulder. "Oh my God. Oh my baby, my sweet baby," she whispered over and over. Ryan dropped to his knees beside them, tears of shock and relief running down his face. He wrapped them both in his arms, and for a brief moment, they didn't care about how or why Lily had ended up there. She was alive. That was all that mattered. But Max didn't move. He stood motionless, ears forward, eyes locked on a patch of ground just a few feet away. His body was rigid, tail stiff, every muscle in his frame pulled taut. He growled, not at Lily, not at the family, but at something below them. Emma felt it first. That strange pressure in the air, as if the world was holding its breath. Something was wrong. Very wrong. "What is he staring at?" Ryan asked, his voice unsteady. Max barked loud, sharp, almost desperate. Then he began to paw at the dirt. Frantically. As if his very soul depended on it. Clumps of earth flew back in all directions. His breathing became more erratic with every dig. Emma stood slowly, holding Lily tighter, eyes fixed on the dark soil that Max was unearthing. "We should call someone," she whispered. But even as she said it, she knew she wouldn't. Not yet. Not before she knew what was buried there. And then they saw it. Just under the second layer of soil, something pale broke the surface. Ryan took a step closer, heart pounding. He knelt, gently brushing the dirt away with trembling fingers. A moment later, he jerked back in horror. It was a hand. A small, delicate hand, too lifeless, too still. His mind couldn't process it at first. It was like staring at a nightmare that had suddenly burst into the real world. "Oh my God. Emma," Ryan stammered. There's someone buried here." Emma couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. Her eyes were wide, fixed on the spot as if it would vanish if she looked away. Max continued to dig, now carefully circling the body as if aware of the fragility of what lay beneath. And slowly, piece by piece, the full form came into view. It was a girl. No more than 8 years old. Her clothes were worn, tattered, and caked with dirt. But her face, though ghostly pale, looked peaceful, almost asleep. Ryan immediately pulled out his phone and called 911, his voice cracking as he described what they had found. Emma sat on the ground, clutching Lily, unable to look away from the child's body. The police and paramedics arrived within minutes. Flashing red and blue lights lit up the dark fields as sirens split the silence of the night. Officers quickly cordoned off the area, gently guiding Emma and Ryan away from the scene. They took Lily into the ambulance for warmth, checking her vitals. She was cold but perfectly healthy. Max, however, refused to leave the girl's side. One of the officers, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and deep lines in his face, knelt down next to Max and gave him a slow, respectful nod. "Good boy," he whispered. "Real good boy." The hours that followed were a blur. Detectives arrived, crime scene tape was stretched across the field, and forensic teams began their grim work. Emma sat inside the farmhouse, a blanket around her shoulders, staring out the window. Her hands shook as she tried to make sense of it all. How had Max known? Why had he dragged Lily outside here, of all places? What if she had been harmed? What if the cold had gotten to her before they did? But deep down, she knew Max hadn't been reckless. He had been trying to show them something. Around dawn, one of the detectives knocked gently on the door. His expression was somber but not surprised. "We've identified the girl," he said softly. "Her name was Anna Whitmore. She went missing from a town 30 miles north, 2 years ago." Emma gasped. "But how did she end up here?" Ryan asked. "We've only lived here for 7 months. Who would have buried her here?" The detective paused. "That's what we're trying to figure out. But we know this, if your dog hadn't found her, she may have remained buried here forever. There would have been no closure for her family. No justice." Emma's eyes welled with tears. As the morning sun began to rise over the horizon, it cast a golden light over the field where darkness had once hidden something so tragic. And at the center of it all, Max lay quietly, eyes still on the spot where Anna had been buried, as if watching over her one last time. He wasn't just a dog. He was a guardian. And he had done something no one could have imagined. But the story wasn't over yet. Because what the police uncovered in the next 48 hours would reveal a truth far more horrifying and closer to home than anyone was ready to believe. 2 days after the night Max led baby Lily outside, the Sanders farmhouse was no longer the peaceful refuge it had once been. Police cars came and went. Reporters hovered outside the fence line. The once quiet town buzzed with rumors. Everyone wanted to know the same thing: how did the body of Anna Whitmore end up buried behind a barn in the Sanders' backyard? Inside the house, Emma couldn't eat. Couldn't sleep. She carried Lily from room to room, clutching her tightly as if the child might vanish if she loosened her grip. Ryan was just as shaken. He didn't say much anymore. He just stared at the spot behind the barn whenever he passed a window. Max stayed close to Lily at all times. The detectives had promised answers soon, but the waiting was unbearable. And then, late one evening, just as the sky darkened into a pale lavender and the first stars began to pierce the horizon, the detective returned, his face grim, a file clutched tightly in his hand. "Emma. Ryan. We need to talk." They gathered in the living room, the house too quiet for comfort. Max sat by Emma's feet, ears twitching. The detective opened the file and laid out several photos and documents across the coffee table. At the center of them all was one name that made Emma's stomach drop. Dale Whitmore. Emma blinked. "That's Anna's father. Isn't it?" The detective nodded. "Yes. And he was also the previous owner of this property." Ryan's eyes widened. "Wait, what?" "Yes," the detective said. 2.5 years ago, Dale owned this farmhouse. Lived here with his wife and daughter, Anna. From the outside, they seemed like a normal family. But behind closed doors, things were different. He paused, glancing toward Lily, who was sleeping peacefully in Emma's arms. Dale had a history of violence, domestic disturbances, controlling behavior. It never led to charges, but neighbors had suspicions. When Anna went missing, Dale claimed she wandered off during a camping trip. Search teams spent weeks combing the woods. Nothing turned up. Eventually, he and his wife separated. She moved away. He sold the house. Emma was frozen. "You're saying she was here the entire time?" The detective nodded. "He buried her in your yard, behind the barn. Right under the place where he used to keep firewood. By the time you moved in, it looked like just another patch of ground." Ryan's hands were clenched into fists. But why didn't anyone find her? During inspections, surveys? Because she was buried deep. And covered well. "It's only thanks to your dog that we ever knew where to look." Emma looked down at Max, a lump rising in her throat. He was staring straight at the detective, his eyes dark and steady. "There's more," the detective said carefully. "We checked Dale's phone records. Just last week, 6 days before your daughter was taken outside, he made a call to someone in this area. We think he was planning to come back. To destroy the evidence." Emma's heart stopped. "Are you saying he was going to dig her up?" "Yes," the detective said. "Or burn the barn. Or something else." But we think your dog sensed something or someone. Maybe Dale scouted the house at night. Maybe Max saw or smelled something none of us could. And he knew he had to act. Emma stared out the window, her mind reeling. Max hadn't been panicking. He had been protecting. Not just Lily, but the truth. Dale is in custody now, the detective added. We confronted him with the evidence. The location. The timing. At first he denied it, but, eventually, he broke. He confessed. Emma's tears came fast, hot, and unstoppable. They buried Anna properly that weekend, in a cemetery lined with maple trees. Her mother came. Aged and trembling, but thankful beyond words. She laid a soft blue ribbon on the coffin and whispered, "You're free now." Max was there, too. He sat quietly at the edge of the crowd, head bowed, tail still. When Anna's mother bent down to touch his head and whispered, "Thank you," he gave her a slow, gentle nudge with his nose. That night, back at the farmhouse, Emma sat beside Max and whispered, "You saved her, Max. You saved both our girls." The story of Max's heroism spread far and wide. News outlets called him a guardian angel in fur. The local sheriff's office awarded him a medal. Animal shelters reported record adoptions, inspired by Max's bravery. But none of that mattered to him. He didn't care about medals or stories. He just curled up on the rug near Lily's crib each night, eyes half closed, one ear always alert, watching, waiting, guarding. Because for Max, it wasn't about being a hero. It was about love. About loyalty. And about never letting the innocent be forgotten.